Hi, this is Brian Pasch, and I have a challenge for general managers and owners of dealer groups. When you hear that customers want a more transparent, faster, and easier way to buy a new car, some of you are saying that would be nice, but it doesn't fit into our sales process. What if you could deliver a transparent, faster, and easier way that was more profitable and sustainable? If you don't believe me, tune into my story about the future of automotive retail powered by the technology of Fuse-Autotech. Hi, this is Brian Pasch, and we're here at Fuse Studios in the Porsche Lounge to begin the story with the man who had the vision for a new way to sell cars, a vision to improve the customer experience. So today's story begins with Andrew Walser. He is partner at Walser Automotive here in Minnesota. Andrew, thanks for sitting down with me and sharing your story. So let's start at the beginning. Automotive group here in Minnesota. And what made you kind of buck the trend? What made you say, we at Walser have to sell cars differently? Because there are going to be some dealers watching this story say, I'd like to, but, and we'll get to those buts later. What was your, not but act?
I think I'm obsessed with trying to make buying a car easy. I always have been. So making it effortless, making it simple. And I think, you look back at 35 years ago when I started the business, it was very inefficient. I didn't see in the next 20 something years any more efficiency. If anything, it was actually more complicated because there was duplicate entries. It just took too long to do a car deal. So I think the goal was to just collapse time and have a more effortless experience for the customer. Honestly, just making it easy to buy a car, because I don't really love the idea of selling. I love the idea of making it really easy for someone to buy something. And our industry is, I think, really had a hard time with that. And there's a lot of reasons for it. Software being one, DMS, CRMs, different, 10 different password and usernames that you have to remember just to complete a car deal. And then your finance office might have a completely different menu system or software. So it's really from the start to the finish. Most dealers are working in, 8 to 10 or 12 different softwares to complete a deal. Now they're fairly proficient at it because they've done it so much, but it's just an inefficient model to begin with.
So when you look back at your attempt to make the buying process easier, your operations more efficient, one of the things you did, you decided to centralize some of the functions. Let's go back to that journey. One of the things you did was centralize F&I. And tell me a little bit about that whole journey of reimagining what the back-end process could look like if someone was bold enough to change.
So I guess what my brother and I saw was the F&I office was a pain point, mostly because it just took too long to get into the F&I office. And I the only person less patient than me is my brother. And I told him, I said, he wasn't in the stores as much then. And I said, it'll take two and a half hours on a Saturday to get in to see someone who can complete your paperwork. And this is a cash deal, which I just found my anxiety went up when I was in a store. And so we weren't really out to eliminate F&I as much as how do we collapse the time so that everyone's a cashier. I've told the story, but it's a true story. So when I went to an Apple store, kind of right before we started down this path, and like today, every Apple store back then was crowded. And I remember walking in going, oh, this is way too crowded. I'm going to have to wait in line to talk to a cashier. I just wanted a charging cord. And I walked in and I looked at the charging cords and I saw the people and I said, I'll come back. So one of the Apple people that worked at the store said, can I help you? And I said, I'm just here to hit a charger and you guys are way too busy. I'll come back later. And it was a young female and she said, oh, I could help you right now. And I said, oh, So this is back in 2010 or 11. She pulled out her little like iPhone. I'm not sure it was an iPhone, but it's some mobile device. And she checked me out right there. And I said, wow, it's the first time. What a novel idea. Like basically everyone's a cashier. And so, at the time we had maybe 30 people at our Toyota store. And I said, instead of having this funnel on a Saturday where you have 30 salespeople feeding deals, and they usually come not every 45 minutes, they come in groups. How do we actually have 30 cashiers instead of 6 or 7 F&I people trying to process deals, which is really inefficient for the customer. So you're just opening up a cashier lane. But how do we do that? We centralized F&I. And at the time, I'm not sure it was a great idea because we were faxing credit apps back and forth. And I'm thinking of the handwriting, and people have a hard time handwriting, so you couldn't even understand the fax. And so that was not very efficient. So the idea wasn't that we were going to eliminate F&I. We were going to collapse time by actually streamlining the F&I process, which we felt like was a bottleneck, just the way it was set up in the structure.
So being a person who is laser focused on process and efficiency and knowing the tools, so a deal may start with a lead that comes into a CRM, eventually sits in the DMS as a historical record. When you looked at all of those 5, 7, 10 different pieces of software in between the CRM and the DMS, you had to make a decision. Hey, there's nothing out here that's going to do what I want it to do. And you decided to build your own software. Process kind of forced you into being in the technology business. Some dealers watching today's interview will say, man, I'm glad Andrew did that because that is not in my wheelhouse. What made you confident, or was it just entrepreneurial boldness that, hey, if it's not there, I'm going to build it?
I'd say more stupidity because we didn't know what actually building. We never thought we were going to be a software company. We frankly just built it for us. So it was very, never the intent to go sell it to other dealers. But as we sort of evolved and realized, I was taught early on from a good friend of mine who's in a technology company, you can either build something or you can buy something. And he said, my advice is if it's available, always buy it because it's very expensive to build it. At the time, there was no solutions that actually completed a transaction with all these multiple software systems that we use and integrated them all into one very simple platform for salespeople to use. And if you're going to collapse time and create cashiers out of the 30 salespeople at Toyota, they needed a software tool or a tool to use that was easy to understand, that was a communication and an integration tool at the same time without working in the DMS, actually without even working in the CRM. So this movement of data between, as you said, the CRM to the DMS and the in-between was really how Fuse came to be.
So for dealers who are not really familiar with the Fuse platform, let me say it this way, and tell me if I'm catching, is that you created the retail point of sale system for automotive. Everything in between the CRM and the DMS, which is that in-store process, is simplified with one screen, one process that can be customized to how a dealer operates. How long did it take for you to really see that benefit of those initial software investments? Was it a 1-year software journey, 2-year, 3-year? Because there are some dealers who may say, hey, I'm going to build my own software. I tell them, like your friend, please don't be in the software business. You did it. How many years did it take to really feel, man, I got this thing right?
I still feel like we're working on it.
Okay.
But I would say we never thought about actually even offering it to other dealers until enough dealers came to see us, because dealers are curious and we share information because we're regional. And so as we would invite and entertain dealers to show them what we do, sometimes they weren't there to see Fuse, they were just there to see how we do things differently, right?
Right.
And so the conversations always ended up, because I usually did the meet and greet in the morning with the dealer.
Right.
And then they would go out to the stores and talk to our people. Then at the end, we'd do kind of like a download.
Right.
And at the end of it was always like, you guys do something, it's really great, but like the software that you use, could we buy that? And I'd say, no, it's not for sale. And I think after enough visits, I said, maybe we should think about actually selling it, because they probably saw something that, when your own silo, sometimes you don't realize,
to it.
Wow, we are much more efficient. But we never set out to be a software company to sell to other dealers until enough dealers asked, could we use it? And at the time, it was built just for us.
Right.
So we had to modernize it, which is a whole different level of cost, right?
That's right.
And make it customizable to how other dealers do business.
This past November 2023, you released Fuse Transact 6.0, so the sixth major revision to the software. And the software is amazing. Could you talk to any of these points? How does the current platform improve efficiency, the customer experience, profitability? Dealers who are watching today are numbers people. They're like, hey, before I invest in a meeting, before I invest in a change of sales process, what's my end result going to be? What would you tell a dealer who just says, hey, give me something that would get me off the couch to book a meeting?
So I would say, because I'm obsessed with wasted time, and I know, just talking to a lot of dealers that I know that are big dealers and small dealers, there's not a dealer that thinks it takes that it doesn't take too long to buy a car. That's right. And so I know that dealers care about this. I know that dealers talk about this, but how do you actually get there? So I would say we never set out with Fuse to increase F&I. In fact, my brother and I talked about it. We were willing to go backwards to actually speed the process up for the customer and improve efficiency, and just make a better customer experience, make it easy to buy a car. The result, we went backwards a little. This is 2013. We went back $50 or $75 a car in PVR, and immediately within 3 or 4 months, we're ahead of that. And so I think we're onto something. So we never set out to say we're going to have better numbers, but what's pretty obvious, and I think logical, is that when you actually spend less time doing inefficient things and having customers sit around, where when they say yes, you just start going, they're more receptive to the products that you would sell in F&I. And so time is money, and I think it's proven that. So, but our goal really wasn't to do that, but it's proven that obviously we can do a deal in as little as 5 or 8 minutes. We have some salespeople, one salesperson who sells 70 to 75 cars a month to individuals. He couldn't do that if he had traditional F&I offices. There's still a need for someone to do F&I and have F&I knowledge in a dealership, but it just reduces sort of that funnel, that bottleneck that happens on a Saturday where you've got 8 people waiting to get into F&I, and it takes 2 hours to service them. So
you mentioned one of your superstars. I think his name is Alex, and we're going to interview him on this journey to help dealers understand what a modern retail sales process looks like. Aside from Alex, who obviously is a top salesman in the entire country, and we know that he can do that because of the Fuse platform, but how does it help the average salesperson? Meaning, dealers are going to be hearing, okay, PVR is up 10, 15%. That in itself could motivate someone to get off the couch and book an appointment. But what does it do for the average person? What does it do for your ability to hire people out of retail with no automotive experience? Let's talk about that lift, because everyone has a superstar, but that's not the problem that dealers have. They have those 20 or 30 people who are selling 10 or 12 cars a month, and they don't know how to get them to 18, 20 plus. What can you tell them or encourage them about how a point of sale system transforms even the average person?
It's a great question. I think we 99% of the people that we hire for sales intentionally have never sold cars before. So we never built a system for the high performer. The high performers just figured out how to use it more effectively, right? So we built it for someone who's a college grad, doesn't have to be a college grad, but that age might be their first stop. They've never bought a car maybe, but what software could they use very easily and efficiently? And I had this vision of teaching someone to go use 9 different entries or 12 different softwares is never going to work. So if we give them one platform, keep them out of the DMS, right? So CRM basically and Fuse is the only 2 softwares that our salespeople work in, which makes it much easier to train. So we built that system for the person who's never sold cars before and allowed them to transact. The obvious, I think, goal was throughput. So time's money in terms of a customer's ability to listen to the products that you're offering. But our goal was to get to 17, 18 per person in terms of sales instead of the average of 10 to 12, right? We have many stores that have done 20 as an average. We kind of feel that right now that's about the perfect amount of coverage and where people start to lose the ability to maybe serve the customers. But the goal all along was 17 or 18 per person versus the 10 to 12. So just throughput.
So we're building a story for the dealers watching today. We have higher PVR, more throughput per sales associate.
Happier customers.
And that's what I wanted to get to. How do you measure that? I mean, I would say that in an ultimate numbers game, you would want to have higher lifetime value. So customers that go through this process, not just once or twice, will be more likely to be loyal customers. Retention is a big issue. But when you ask dealers, how are they measuring LTV? It's hard. They often don't have the systems. So for a dealer who says, okay, higher PVR, yeah, more sales per sales associate, got that. But I'm not really sure how to measure customer happiness. How does Walser look at it? How do you measure that would relate to someone who's just focused on a better, profitable model that customers like?
So, a lot of the OEMs now have moved to loyalty as a measurement instead of your traditional customer satisfaction because scores can be gamed.
Right.
I think the answer is there's a lot of ways to do that. I mean, you can look at Google reviews. You can just sit and listen to customers. You can ask your friends. You can get the CSI scores from the OEM. You can look at loyalty. But I would say it's probably a combination of all those things that sum up how I feel we're performing with customers. I think the thing that I like to hear the most is when a friend calls me or a referral and says, I can't believe how easy that was. Like, I wish car buying was like that all the time. And I said, so, why did they say that? Because we valued their time. And generally it's because they get in and out so quickly that they're like, who wants to spend 3 hours or even 2 hours on a Saturday at a dealership? Who wants to spend any time at a dealership? You want to actually drive a car. You're there to experience that car. But people want to get on with their lives and move on to the next thing. And spending time in a dealership, and I'm sure Alex will tell you this, is not what customers want to do. So our goal is to actually go as fast as they want and get them out, and so that they can enjoy the rest of their Saturday or Sunday or whatever day it is.
You mentioned that dealers come to speak with you, to see it. They see a collaborative sales process in the showroom. They see throughput. And I bet at the end of the day, when you do that download, since I've talked to many dealers, they may say, Andrew, hey man, what you're doing here is amazing. And I wish I could do this at my dealership, and then here's what I've heard. Our culture doesn't support that. I'm going to lose some key people. It's too disruptive. But we should be in the people-pleasing business and at a profitable level. They know that their dealership is disappointing. So what do you tell someone who's watching today and said, man, great, but what are you telling them that would give them encouragement that the change with Fuse, since you've worked out all the kinks, you have the training, isn't as painful as they might imagine?
Well, like most dealers, I still look at the bottom line first, right? In terms of like, you're making decisions around, you want to have a better customer experience. You want to make it effortless. You want to make it fast. At the end of the day, we've always been willing to go backwards a little bit to go forwards, right? But this is a case that I actually expected to go backwards where we didn't. And I think the but would be, there's not a dealer that I know that isn't interested in actually making this a better experience. That we all do. The question is, what's in the way of doing that? Because it's actually physically impossible to get people in and out in 5 or 10 minutes on a cash deal from Yes, or even 20 minutes or half hour on lease with the multiple systems they work in. And so I think you have to have, a commitment to what you're trying to get accomplished, which is if I told dealers that the F&I PVR didn't change and they could speed up the transactions and be 2.5 times more efficient in terms of speed, they would all sign up for that. I think the biggest concern, the but, is what happens to my F&I if I streamline this process through a software. You could still have F&I managers do it. You could still have one cashier or multiple cashiers like we do it. At the end of the day, it's going to speed up the process.
Andrew, you mentioned people come and see you at the dealership. You kind of give them the lay of the land. They go ask questions, see how the software, that single screen, is being used to change the retail experience. They come back, do the download, and I'm sure many of them say, wow, this collaborative process, this single screen, it's really working well. I'd love to have that at my dealership, but, and the buts could be, hey, I'll lose some good people. Hey, I think it's going to take too long. What I'm hearing from dealers who are using the platform is that whichever retail process they're modeled for, the single screen is more efficient. The single screen gives them higher PVR. The single screen gives the customer a better experience. So what would you say to a dealer who's just feeling like change is too much? I'd like it, but.
Question actually makes me reflect back to 2000, sort of 15, 16, when we started to roll it out at all the stores. And our top salesperson at our Toyota store came up to me and said, if I end up doing more of the F&I work up front, aren't you going to slow me down, boss? And I said, no, I actually think I'm going to speed you up. He's like, I don't know how that's possible. And I said, do you trust me? And he said, yes, but I'm not seeing the why. I'm not seeing the how. And I said, the theory is, how long does it take for you to get a customer into F&I on a Saturday? He said, 2 hours. So I said, how many cars could you sell on a Saturday? He said, 3 if I'm doing well, just by the nature of how long it takes to get in. I said, so if I told you that you could immediately begin a transaction in one screen that actually completed the whole process, what would you say? And he said, well, that'd be pretty great. And at the time, he was a top salesperson in terms of volume, but generally top volume salespeople are not really great for the F&I department because they rush things through and they just want to get a sale. Not only did that person's sales go up about 20%, he had the highest PVR F&I in the company because he controlled the speed of the transaction, and now he became engaged and the customer is more engaged. And that was someone that the customer already trusted, right? So when we're talking about a service contract or gap or things that are, these intangible things, who is the trusted primary source? It's that salesperson. Much easier for them to transition into a sale of one of those products if they're already trusted in terms of them buying the car.
So it's really a coaching strategy as well. Not surprising the store, getting people into a new vision, selling the benefits, right? The what's in it for me with the salespeople. I think about all the headwinds in automotive retail, the threat of new entrants coming in, changes in OEM compensation and profitability. These are topics in the news lately. It would seem to me that dealers, if they had any motivation in the last 5 years to change the retail process, it's now. Because if retention is going to be key, if loyalty and profitability and customer experience are going to help shield the dealership from competitive forces, now would be the time. Is that how you're seeing it? That
Yeah, I
you're
think
glad
before
now?
COVID, like right when COVID started, I felt like dealers were at the top of their game because we started to think we're going to have to survive in this different world, right? We might have to be digital. And what happened, I think, is took everyone by surprise, which the business became way too easy. And I think even including us, you get a little lazy, right? Because in some of the processes that you had before, maybe you relaxed a little bit. And frankly, there's a lot of salespeople out there in the industry that have never really actually had to present a car. It's just, yes, it's available.
Yes.
Right. I remember a dealer told me one time, he's like, I had a salesperson come in my office and say, they won't take it. He's like, what do you mean they won't take it? He's like, well, it's MSRP. And they said, no. He said, what do I do? He's like, oh my gosh, this is a new time. So they actually haven't really even lived in a time where there's supply issues, and some of the OEMs have more supply issues than others.
Right.
But the efficiency of how we get through a transaction has never, to me, never been solved, and this is a solution. When dealers came and saw us, you said, what was the but?
Yeah.
Frankly, the but was, can I have the software? Because they can't see themselves. They know, and I knew, that there's no other software that can collapse all these other softwares that they use into one on one screen that allows you to go from start to finish for someone who's never done F&I before.
Right.
And I think that was the big but. PVR is the next question is, do I have to sacrifice or go backwards in PVR? Because no dealer would say they want to make it slower, more complex, or harder. Because we all want to make it easier.
Sure.
But what's the tools that allow us to get there? And I think that's what Fuse filled that void. So if I could say your PVR will go up, your throughput will go up, and your speed will go 2.5 times what you are today, which equals that efficiency, I think those are the biggest buts for a dealer that are solved.
Love to hear that, because dealers facing today's headwinds need new strategies to be more efficient, more profitable, to stop getting eaten alive by floor planning costs. They have to be more efficient. I think that when you told the story about the Apple retail experience, we all have experienced, whether it's at a luxury hotel, a modern store, or even amazing food and dining experiences that have just been completely transformed. Automotive has been the laggard, and Fuse has solved that. When you look at what's happening in the software and your learning experiences as more and more dealers are now on the platform, what's one next step, something that you're looking forward to or can imagine would, let's call it Fuse 7.0. What's something on the horizon? You say, Brian, this platform is ready to go, but there's always room for improvement. This is one area I'm looking to notch it one level higher.
So I think the question really is, sort of this in-store experience versus the digital retail experience. I think digital retail to most dealers is, I think it is what it is. It's a lead.
Super lead.
Right now.
Yep.
It's a super lead. Where the OEMs are they're trying to solve a problem, but they're sort of creating part of the problem because they don't realize that whatever lead tool that isn't what happens in a store. I think from a Fuse 7.0, to the extent that people would like to buy from home, our software was built as an in-store tool to handle everything that happens in the store, which is much more easy to articulate back online, because you have two different ecosystems. If you're working in a digital retail tool and it's only approved by an OEM to do that, or maybe it's only the banks that the OEM offers as a captive.
Right.
What are you going to do when they get to the store? Which totally changes the guest experience, because if I worked a deal here and I come into the store and I'm working a deal in a completely different software, I think for me, 7.0 is the integration of the two ecosystems to make it seamless. For as much as a customer wants to do, and I think most people still want to do most of the work at home today, I'm not sure there'll ever be a time that even 30% or 40% won't want to come in because they're still buying a very expensive thing.
That's right.
And they want to experience it. They just don't want to spend a lot of time once they're there. So our job is to make it very easy for them to buy a car once they get to the dealership. And if they want to do it online, Fuse should allow them to do that too.
You know, I look back during the pandemic, dealers rushed to digital retailing software just to support what you're saying. And they thought, well, man, people want to buy a car at home. And there was projections, by the way, this year, 2024, that 50% of car sales were going to be done online. From what I can tell, it's less than 5% of transactions are being done completely remote, and 95% are still happening in the showroom, which means the most important experience is the showroom experience. And that's why I love the fact that Fuse decided to tackle the more complicated problem where the volume of transactions are happening. Mimicking or mirroring the same calc engine online is the easier piece to create that unified customer experience. Andrew, many years ago, you decided to set out to be more efficient, to create a better customer experience that has resulted in high profitability, national attention, and now the Fuse-Autotech platform. If there was one thing you wanted to tell your peers about how you feel you're ready for the future using a platform like this, as compared to the 5, 7, 10 platforms they're using today, what's one thing you might say to them that would encourage them to take a risk, because it's probably a risk in their mind, and see how Fuse can work in their retail experience?
I'll summarize it like one word: effortless. So there's not a person I know, not a dealer, that wants things more complex, harder, longer, more complicated. People today, whether you're a car dealer or whether you're a customer, no one wants things harder and slower. So the focus is, if you can actually have more profitability and the experience for your customers and your employees, by the way, is effortless. You can't be effortless for the customer if it's not effortless for the employee.
Right.
And so you have to have a system that allows someone to do that. And I think I am obsessed with it, but I know other dealers are too. It's just, how do you do it?
Right.
And so this is sort of the genesis of the software itself, is how can we complete that transaction and make it so easy that throughput goes up. I'd like to tell you that we thought of all these things that are going to increase. We were really just trying to improve the customer experience. The byproduct of that was more F&I, more PVR, more throughput, and higher customer satisfaction. So it's, the win-win-win.
Yes.
And I know that every dealer and every customer and every person doesn't want things to be harder.
That's right. That's right. Well, for the dealers who are watching today, you heard the origins, you heard about the vision, but more importantly, you've learned about the results. But we're not going to take Andrew's word for it. We're going to talk to the leaders behind the technology. We're going to be talking to the general managers, sales managers, and sales associates that are using Fuse-Autotech. The complete story is one that will challenge your thinking and hopefully motivate you to create a similar retail experience with similar increases in profitability, similar facilitation of automotive sales that are faster, easier, more transparent, and more profitable. So let's get in and meet the teams that are using Fuse-Autotech to sell more cars in a digital age. Andrew, as we've been discussing Fuse-Autotech, it is everything between the CRM and the DMS. It's that single screen that's enabling that showroom experience to be faster and easier and more transparent. But there's dealers listening to today's story and saying, hey, Brian, what about the people who come, can't make a decision, How does Fuse-Autotech help continue that remote retail experience? And there's a whole set of tools that enable remote e-contracting, remote shared credit applications and approval. Talk about this piece, because it's not just making the showroom experience better, but it's kind of, well, getting the right people in front of the tools, even if they're outside the dealership.
So I think the flaw in the current system is that, again, these two ecosystems don't speak to each other. So because Fuse was designed, developed, and is an in-store tool, the remote nature of what we've built in terms of the ability to do things from someone's living room that actually connect to the same software when they get in the dealership. I know it sounds crazy, but that is the game-changing event, because we don't ever have to start over when they get in the store. So if you want to do a remote credit app, if you want to sign all the paperwork, we're not going to a different system that's digital retail. We're going to the software that actually is the in-store tool that is now remote to your home, to your business.
Right. So dealers who are looking for that single calc engine, the single customer experience with a single record without rekeying to build trust and transparency, the Fuse-Autotech platform is all they need.
That's all they need, yes.
Right.